Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Salute to Dads programming. And so we're going to start off with a great treat here. You can see the set, and we're going to let John Ross and Paul Farges talk about their woodworking fun and share some of their pieces that they've made and tell us a little bit more about the wood shop. So is John first? Okay, here you go.
Greetings. Paul and I have been sort of regulars down in the wood shop, and so the powers that be here thought that it might be of interest to hear something about our experience and something about the wood shop. A lot of people have never seen the wood shop or know that it's there in the basement, so everyone who has any interest at all should take a look. I got into woodworking sort of genetically because my father was always doing something in woodworking, adding a room to the house or tearing one off or putting a door in where it didn't go before. And I was always the gopher for him. And anything he ever said about a tool just stuck. Anything he said about flowers or birds wasn't there the next day. So how do you explain it? The next thing I wanted to say was a little bit about the history of the wood shop here. Bob Carlson was one of the first people to move in here, I think, and took care of the wood shop and brought a number of his tools with him, which we're still using. The wood shop originally was on the third floor. It was quite small. And then it was moved down to a much larger room in the basement where it's still located. Another person who gave at least one or two machines was Paul Luery. Many of you will remember Paul Luery. He was down there in his late 90s at least and into age 100 almost every day, putting in an hour or two every morning. He'd come in and put his cane away and you'd go over to his area and work on some project, coffee table or something that was really quite ambitious. And he had skills that the rest of us didn't even know about. So he had done some serious woodworking in his time. I thought you might be interested in the actual tools that are there, and it's quite a list. There's a lathe which came in recently thanks to a new person joining in. There's a planer and a jointer. There's a radial arm saw, chop saw, band saw. There's a router. These have been contributed to some extent by different people who moved in. And sometimes someone moving in has so many things they could offer that there's just no room. There's also a classic carpenter's bench, quite long with all the extra vices and the holes for the dogs, which is a very, very useful thing with various workstations there. So we've done various things over the years. Some of them we've done gratis for our friends here in the residence. And so now we'll display and talk about some of our wares. First, Paul will take over.
Well, I should say that I guess my interest in woodworking was also genetic. My father didn't know which end of a hammer worked. And in a family where there were 10 people, sometimes 12, I was the designated person to fix things, repair things, or make things. So here I am, umpteen years later. Let's see. I think I would start here with the signs that are going on the trails. I don't know whether many of you go down to the Millbrook Preserve, but these signs all over the Millbrook Preserve, about 24, 26 of them down there, were made down in our wood shop with a router and stencils to, I don't know whether any of you can see these letters, but they're all stenciled into the wood. This is cedar, and this is just plain #1 pine.
How did you make, sorry to interrupt, how did you make the actual letters?
The letters are done with what are called stencils, which are, let's see if I can get one here. So these stencils are placed down on the wood and in a row, and they all interlock. When the stencils interlock for the word, say, trail, you then secure them to the wood with either tape or little tiny tacks and route them out. The arrows on all of the trails that are currently in the preserve had to be hand carved because there was no stencil for those. But just yesterday, I cut a piece of steel for the first time into the form of an arrow, and I now have a stencil for any future arrows. This little box here has all of the stencils organized by their place in the alphabet. So letters that are rarely used are in one bin, punctuation and marks are in the others. The vowels are in a separate one. And the box itself I made to do that. Everything's intertwined there, and the box closes with a little clasp. Let's see. Let's look at these stools here. This stool was made for Julie Radford. Julie, as some of you know, is a seamstress who has wonderful sewing machines and materials up in her apartment, and she wanted a stool that people could stand on. So I made this one with these tapered legs and a piece of old carpeting on the top, so anybody can stand on it and not collapse. This is a stool here that I made for Annette Johnson. This is one of two of the stools I made for her. Very simple. I call it a farm stool for some reason. And it's simple joinery just with screws and glue.
So how did you make the perfect oval on top?
The perfect oval on top was cut with a saber saw.
But the pattern
I probably picked up something that was an oval, traced it, and then just followed the line. I don't remember exactly how I did it. Let's see. Lamps. These 3 stone lamps here are made with stones that have come from various rivers around here and up in New Hampshire. Some are granite, some are conglomerate, some are sedimentary. And I use a diamond bit to drill through stone. Each stone takes about 20 minutes of cursing and swearing before the hole is through the stone. I set the stone in a pail of water, so where I'm drilling is always covered with moisture, which means the bit doesn't get too hot. And then typical lamp parts go to make this. The bottoms are routed out so the plug comes through. I don't know whether anybody can see these or not, but it doesn't make too much of a difference. And there are three lamps here that were originally going to go to the Kaleidoscope and be sold there. I have an order for one of them already, but I'm not sure we're going to have a Kaleidoscope this year. So meanwhile, they sit. And I also have done lamps made from books, such as this one right here. These are all used books with a hole drilled down through the bottom, just as the same with the stones, except it's a much easier bit. Let's see. The books have to be glued shut so that you can't open them, particularly the top one. And they're just used books. But as my son pointed out to me, one of these books, the third one down in this pile, which I never read, I just picked them up in a used bookstore. The third one down happens to be a Chinese erotic novel. He lived in China for years and he was very familiar with the title. I asked him how he became familiar with it.
Why do you have to glue them shut?
So they don't open. But you can see that even this one is starting to curl already.
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you
And
decide the height?
I, E-Y-E, by I. John asked me how I decided on the height. You need a mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking Paul how he decided on the height.
It's mostly by eye, and the same thing with these lamps. I just thought the arrangement of the stones should end here or there, with the smaller ones obviously on the top. But I think most of the time today should be spent on some of these wonderful things John has done, which is really beautiful cabinetry and joinery. And before I turn it over to you, I want to say that I'm curious about how many people watch our show here. So today, like the Groucho Marx show, we have a secret word. The secret word is schwangunk. So the first 3 people who will say to me, not John, but me, that they noticed this today and they know the secret word, get a free brownie on my tab. The first 3 people. Family's not allowed, staff is not allowed. Now it's over to you, John.
What was that word again?
Schwangunk.
Oh, Sean. Okay. Well, I had three things here to talk about. One is this chessboard. The history there is I don't know where the idea came from. I really don't remember. But the idea was to make a chessboard and make it big enough so it was sort of like the chess tables that we were using in the chess club in one of the recreation rooms. In any case, I had been doing some leather work as well, and I had some leather left over of different colors, and so I cut these 2-inch squares for the top. I went to Lowe's, got a birch plywood. I had to sort of route out a bed the same thickness as the leather was, so it'd be fairly flush, and then put polyurethane over it. The legs are tapered, which usually is better than to have just a straight leg that looks like a little box. And so Gretchen's idea was to put the pieces on here. So that's the chessboard. I use it in my SETI to put papers on and so on.
John, you hid the grain of the plywood. How did you tell them how you did that on the top?
It's just as it came. It's from one sheet of birch plywood. So the grain you see is the grain you get.
But on the edges here.
Oh, well, without these strips, you see the raw edge of the plywood, and no one likes that. It's not aesthetic. So you take other boards, these strips here, and they're partly just glued on. In fact, they are wider than the plywood is thick, so it looks like there's more weight to the table. And then there's a small nail gun, and you go along, you put a block of wood here, so it comes up flush to be the same as the top. And while it's in position, you hit it with a nail gun, and then do that as you go along. The heads of the nails don't really show, and polyurethane is covering that as well. The corners have to be mitered, and that's always a little tricky and never perfect. So anyway, that's
and how many coats are on there?
Probably 3.
Is the leather covered?
Yeah.
You don't, the leather is covered with polyurethane too?
Yeah, it doesn't bother the leather. And if you spill something on it, you're protected.
And the legs are tapered.
The legs are tapered, yeah. And they're tapered on this dimension, but also on that dimension.
Yeah.
Now, some people would only taper it on one dimension. But anyway, while I was at it, there's a tapering jig. It's really very simple. It angles 2 arms on the jig. And so when you move the piece, which is right next to it and held next to it, through the saw, it's going to cut in with a deeper bite on part of it as you go along than the other part. So that's the way of tapering the legs.
Well, I just learned something.
I couldn't find that jig downstairs, so I bought another one, and then I found 2 way up high. So I have 3 jigs now. This table is called a flip table. It's also by the Amish called a sewing table. They put drawers into it and all. The idea was in colonial times that you have the fireplace going and you want to sit nearby, but you might get too much heat, in which case you flip it. So that goes up, and now you're protected from the heat. Otherwise, it can be a cup of tea or whatever. In order to make it, I went to a workshop for a week in Philadelphia, and you start, they provided the wood. It's all Peruvian mahogany. Wonderful wood, and it's fairly hard. So the central spire you get as a simple column, and you put it on a lathe, and the lathe lets you shape it this way. They had a full-page mock-up of the lathe, the actual dimensions, which is posted in front of you, so you know the actual distance from the top to this part, to that part, to that part, and so on. So that creates that particular piece. The oval was done by kind of a prototype they had, and it goes around the outside, and then you kind of smooth it around, and you sand it, and so on. The mechanism for, let me see this. The mechanism is a little complex, but it lets you go up and down. And for traveling, you can take this entirely off. You also, when you're traveling, you would like to take the legs off. So they're dovetailed in. Wow. So dovetails mean it's strong because the legs want to splay out, but they won't splay out because it's dovetailed. And they were saying, you know, you glue these in. I didn't want to glue them in because I wanted to travel with them. So I just left them loose, and it has the advantage that I can sort of show how it's put together.
Wow.
One little effect is the leg is tapered. It's thicker here than it is at the bottom. It's just a little aesthetic effect that you're not quite conscious of, but it's there somewhere in the deep in the brain. Okay.
John, show them the top of the table with that beautiful center of mahogany. Really, really nice design element. I don't know whether people can see this, but the burl of years in here is just gorgeous and perfectly centered.
It was just an accident. They had 6 of these because 6 of us were in the wood shop.
Oh, the dovetail just fell.
And that's okay, I'll get that. So I saw this, so I rushed to the head of the line and got this one. What we'll do is put this upside down for now.
Yeah, move it that way.
Okay, so onto the what we call the hat rack. Libby and I were traveling in Fort Myer, and we went to the place where Edison had his summer workshop and his house. What should be in the house was this tall, highly elaborate, wonderful woodworking of a hat rack. And well, wouldn't it be nice to have one? Well, it became clear very early that a much simpler design had the potential for actually getting done. So this is oak. The joinery is all biscuits. Biscuitry is just a way in which one board going into another one, you do a slot, and then you do a slot in the other piece, and then you have a biscuit that goes in between, you glue it all. So that's all the joinery. This mirror, from the back, you route in a place to receive the mirror, then you cover it all up. I can't really show you the back, but anyway, so this is sitting near our front door. So as you go out and pick up your hat, pick up your mask, pick up your keys, see if you look decent. And so it's very useful. You can hide things in here. The hardware was entirely separate. I don't know where we got it. So I think that's the story of the hat rack.
And did you say that was Amish also?
Pardon?
Did you say that was an Amish design?
No, it was what seemed to me to be simple enough that it was feasible for me to make it. coming down from this creature that Edison had in his house, which was really wonderful. I mean, it had places for your wet umbrellas to go down. They had metal arms coming out to receive the umbrella, and so on and so forth.
And that's beveled glass in the mirror there, I see.
Yes, it had a lot of glass.
Makes a big difference. It's beveled.
Yes, this is beveled. You pay more for that, but then for decades afterwards, you like it better.
Yeah. And that is oak, is that right? All of that
it's
is
all oak. So it's very rectangular. There's a shelf at the bottom for shoes. Actually, I made 3 of them because a very good friend of ours saw one and said, I want one. And she had helped us a great deal over the years, and so that was another. And then we didn't have one here, we had one in Florida, so turned out making 3 of them. But, it's fun.
Well, it must be very useful near to the door, as you said, for keys and masks and whatever.
It's all loaded up.
And it doesn't take up that much depth.
No, this is about 1 foot.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stick out. It makes it slightly, but, it doesn't fall over, so.
Very nice, very nice.
There we go.
And as John said, we have been making various things for various residents here. And I'm reminded that people who had trouble with the door closers now have, I think I made about 16 wedges for people who are having trouble with the door closers.
Well, there have been quite a variety of things. You know, it's fun. I mean, Paul and I both say, you know, we're just basically unhappy if we don't have a project
That's right.
going.
That's right.
And we really appreciate when people will say, here, I've got this chair that needs fixing or whatever. So it's something to do down in the shop. We want to be sure that everybody realizes that the shop, if anything, is underused. And there's a big welcome for people who have skills or would like to learn skills. Bob Carlson will go with you, or Paul will, or I will, or one or two of the other people who are very skilled and do use the shop regularly.
And all we ask, though, it's very, very hard to keep the shop clean. And we ask you, please, after using any of the saws or anything that creates dust, clean it up, vacuum it.
Paul Luery, when he was 100 and was frail, would still, every single day when he left there, would take this huge kind of cumbersome vacuum thing and clean up. There's no sawdust left when he went out of the room. That is not true of everyone who uses it now. And there's a kind of a constant agenda that goes on about that.
We needle each other about trying to keep it clean.
We put signs up, which people ignore and so on. Well, we love to receive questions, but it's not feasible. But really on email or whatever, if you've got a project, please let us know.
Yeah. I think that does it for us.
I think that's about all we had.
All right. Thank
Gretchen?
you, Gretchen. Are we still on camera?
You are. And what I'm going to do is turn the camera over to the other table. And then
Yeah, we can see it turning.
I want the picture here.
Hi, Bert.
Hello. Hello.
Did you clean up afterwards?
You've been watching, huh?
Yeah.
Were you watching it in your apartment or where?
No, down here.
It's in the gym.
Gym.
The gym.
Oh, I didn't know it had it. Okay, I had the Did the voices come through clearly?
Yes, very clearly.
I'm in my apartment.
When the women talk, they don't emote as well as the men. I find that a lot of the women who don't have a projection, sometimes it's hard to hear. You know, I heard you very well. I always try to keep loud, knowing that Jesus has been there on our hearing.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Sounds good. Hello, everybody. It's Friday, so it must be sports trivia. Hi, Bob. They got me way over here now, but they gave me a table with baseballs and a glove and a pitcher, so I'm right at home. Of course, Sunday is Father's Day, and my son asked me what I wanted for Father's Day. He gave me a choice of a cane or a seeing eye dog, and I told him I have lots of canes, so I'm expecting a seeing eye dog in the mail. In fact, the carton arrived this morning, and I figured if there's a dog in there, I got to open it, let the dog breathe a little, so I just opened it a little crack. Maybe I have a seeing eye dog, and maybe I don't. Anyhow, Sunday is Father's Day, and I'm glad it's not going unnoticed by Woodland Pond. And let me tell you a little story about my father. Going back a while, I was 4 years old. Every Friday, my mother took me to visit my grandmother. We lived in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. I had to take the Brighton train to Coney Island and then take the Sea Beach train to where my grandmother lived. And we would leave the same time that my father was going to work. So we walked to the train station together. My father had to take the train into the city, so he used a different platform than I did. And on his platform, there was chewing gum machines. You put a penny in, you turned the handle, and out came a box of chiclets. To a 4-year-old, that was an unbelievable gift. Anyhow, my father would then throw the chiclets across the tracks to the platform that my mother and I were standing on. And with great glee, I opened the box, gave my mother one chiclet, and I had one. Got two in a box for a penny. Anyhow, this one particular day, it was extremely windy. My father threw the box across the tracks toward me, but the wind got a hold of it and blew it onto the tracks. I was extremely disappointed. I was fighting back the tears. But of course, when I was raised, I was taught men don't cry. So even at 4 years old, I held back the tears. And then my father's train pulled into the station, and I could no longer see him. I stood there for a couple of minutes. His train pulled out. When the last car pulled away, lo and behold, my father was still standing there. He did not get on the train. He went back to the gum machine, put another penny in, got another box, and this time successfully threw it across the tracks. And you can't imagine how happy I was. My father was willing to come late to work, and work was very important in those days. But the lesson I learned was that he thought I was more important than his job. And to this day, it still brings tears to my eyes to think about it. And now on to baseball. A year later, I was 5 years old. My dad took me to my first baseball game. He was a Dodger fan, and Ebbets Field was real close to Sheepshead Bay. But he decided to take me up to the Yankee Stadium, all the way up in the Bronx. It was a good hour ride on the train. I suspect he wanted me to see Babe Ruth because Babe Ruth was in his declining years, and my father wanted me to have a chance to observe the Babe. I walked into the Yankee Stadium, and I was overwhelmed by the size. It was huge. And I don't think I ever saw so many people in one place. In fact, I didn't know there were that many people in the whole world. 65,000 people sitting in Yankee Stadium. And of course, the Babe hit a home run. And I asked my dad, how come he's walking around the bases when everybody else was running? And my father's answer was, he's too old and fat to run. And so my conception of Babe Ruth was an old fat man. And I was amazed to find out in the records that that old fat man had stolen home 10 times in his career and was a great athlete. He was a pitcher when he started out. He was brought up in Baltimore, and the Boston Red Sox picked up his contract, and he was a pitcher for the Red Sox. And he won 20 games in 2 years. He pitched for the Red Sox. But the Red Sox owner was in debt, needed money, and so they traded Babe Ruth to the Yankees for a big sum of money. And Babe Ruth, the Yankees decided, was such a good hitter that they couldn't afford to let him just play one every 4 days. So they turned him into an outfielder so he could play every day. And play he did and hit home runs. The Red Sox had no idea what they were letting go of, but they went for 100 years without winning the World Series, and in Boston it was known as the Curse of the Bambino. And they came close to winning World Series many, many times, but they couldn't seem to do it. I remember one such time in 1986. The Red Sox were playing the New York Mets. And the Red Sox were heavy favorites. And the first 5 games were very exciting. The Red Sox were leading 3-2. They needed just one more game to win the World Series and break the curse of the Bambino. And in the 9th inning, the Red Sox had a 2-run lead when the Mets came up to bat the bottom of the 9th. The first 2 Mets made out, and hope seemed very slight. The Red Sox just needed one more out to win the World Series and break the curse of the Bambino. And the Mets hitter was that catcher, Carter. And Carter had 2 strikes on him, so the Red Sox were 1 strike away from winning the World Series when Carter singled to left. The next batter was the Mets left fielder, whose name I forgot, and he got a single. So the Mets had 2 runners on, but the Red Sox still had a 2-run lead with 1 out needed to win the World Series. The next batter up was the Mets third baseman, whose name escapes me also. And he got a hit, knocked in 1 run, and now the Red Sox lead was only 1, but they still only needed 1 out to win the World Series. The next batter up was Mookie Wilson. And the pitch was a breaking pitch down at Mookie's feet, and Mookie skipped out of the way of it, and it was scored a wild pitch, and home came the tying run from third. The score was now tied. The next pitch, Mookie hit it, soft ground ball to first base, and Bruckner was the Red Sox first baseman, and he had it go through his legs, and the runner from second scored all the way, and the Mets had won Game 6 and tied the World Series at 3 games apiece. And of course, they went on to win the deciding 7th game, and the Mets won the World Series, and the curse of the Bambino continued on. Babe Ruth went on to hit many, many home runs. Broke the record one year with 60 home runs. But when Ruth started hitting home runs, people returned to the ballparks. It was after the White Sox scandal, and people gave up on baseball. But they all started to come to the stadiums to see the Babe hit home runs. And so the attendance picked up in Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, wherever. And the Babe was hitting home runs. The Yankees had been playing for many years at the Polo Grounds. They shared the Polo Grounds with the Giants. The Yankees didn't have their own stadium. But when Ruth started to hit home runs and crowds started to appear, the Yankees had the money to build a new stadium. And the Yankee Stadium was then called the house that Ruth built. And I was glad that I had an opportunity to see the Babe at the Yankee Stadium. It was quite a thing for a young kid. All right, time for trivia. People have been telling me that they've been getting 4 or 5, 6 questions right. So I decided, in honor of Father's Day, I would make the questions a little easier. I hope you find them a little easier. Question number 1. Who was the first pitcher to throw a no-hitter in 4 consecutive years. And that was the great Dodger pitcher, Sandy Koufax. 1962 through 65, he pitched no-hitters in each of those years. Next question. Who were the 2 Olympic swimmers who played Tarzan in the movies? And the answer, Buster Crabbe and Johnny Weissmuller. They each took turns playing Tarzan. Next question. How many players on a team? I'm sorry, my reading is getting worse. How many passes are allowed in the game of volleyball? And the answer is 2 passes. The third person to touch the ball has to hit it over the net. Next question. In 1927, when Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs, who was the most valuable player in the American League? And you could figure out from the question that it wasn't Babe Ruth. And the answer is Lou Gehrig. And that was the year that Gehrig hit 184 runs batted in, which is quite a feat, especially when he batted right after Ruth. And if Ruth hit 60 home runs, that means Gehrig came up to bat at least 60 times with nobody on base. And he still batted in 184 runs. And he was the most valuable player. Who was the first rookie to start in an all-star game, an all-star baseball game? The answer, Joe Dimaggio, Joe D. 1936, he broke into the American League and was nominated to the All-Star game. The reason the Yankees were called the Bronx Bombers, they had a lot of home run hitters. In addition to Gehrig and Ruth, they had Tony Lazzeri and Big Bill Dickey and George Selkirk. And then along in 1936 came Joe Dimaggio. So it's no wonder they were called the Bronx Bombers. Incidentally, the Yankee Stadium was built right across the river from the Polo Grounds where the Yankees started playing. Not the Hudson River, it was the Harlem River, and that separated the Bronx from Manhattan. So the Giants were in Upper Manhattan and the Yankees were in the Bronx. Therefore, the Bronx Bombers. How many players can play on the field on a soccer team at the same time? And the answer is 11. Same as a football team has 11, a soccer team has 11. How many runners are in a relay race on the same team? And the answer is 4. 4 runners in a relay race on each team. What is the designated hitter in baseball? What does that mean? The designated hitter. Well, the American League has a designated hitter. The National League never adopted it. It means the pitcher doesn't come to bat. They are allowed to place another player in that doesn't play in a field, and he hits instead of the pitcher. Doesn't have to bat ninth. He can bat any place in the batting order. And in a World Series, when the American League plays the National League, I don't know what that was. The designated hitter is only used when the American League has the home field. When the National League has the home field, there's no designated hitter. The pitcher has to bat. In football, for a touchdown to be scored, does the ball have to pass over the goal line? And the answer is no. It just has to touch any part of the goal line to be a touchdown. How often are the Olympics played? Every 4 years, except this year. This year is an exception. It's been an exceptional year. In golf, what does having honors mean? It means you have the lowest score on the last hole, and therefore you get to tee off first. You have honors. In golf, why do they yell four? And the answer is they're not yelling F-O-U-R, they're yelling F-O-R-E. They're warning people in front of them to be on the lookout for a ball that may be hitting them in the head. So you yell four. In football, what does sudden death mean? Sudden death. It means when the score is tied, the next team that scores wins the game. The next score wins the game. That's sudden death. Although now if the score is tied and one team kicks a field goal, the other team gets a chance to have the ball also. In baseball, what is a pitch out? A pitch out is when a catcher suspects a runner on base is going to try to steal, and he signals to the pitcher to throw a ball very wide where the hitter won't be able to reach it, so that if the runner is running, catcher has a good opportunity to throw the runner out. And that's a pitch out. In highlight, how many teams are in one game in highlight? And the answer is eight teams play at once. Whether it's singles or doubles, there are 8 teams. Who was credited with inventing the game of baseball? And the answer is Abner Doubleday. He was a Civil War officer, and that's when baseball was invented. In basketball, what is a double dribble? And that's where you dribble the ball, you bounce the ball, and then stop bouncing it, hold it, and then start bouncing it again. And that's called the double dribble, and that is illegal, and you lose possession of the ball. Back to baseball. If a batter swings at the ball and the ball hits the batter, what does the umpire rule? And the answer is it's a strike. Even though the ball hit the batter, if the umpire swings, even though the ball hits the batter, if the batter swings at it, it's called a strike. In soccer, can a player touch the ball with his hands? And it's a trick question because if you said no, the goalie is allowed to use his hands. So the answer to the question is yes, the goalie can use his hands. When can a golfer pick up his ball? And the answer is on the green, he can pick up his ball, but he has to mark it first before he picks it up. He puts a marker down right behind the edge of the ball, and then he may pick it up. Sometimes they pick up the ball so that it's not in the way of somebody else putting. Also, if you hit a ball out of bounds or if you hit a ball into the water, you get a penalty of stroke. Add one stroke to your score, and you get a free drop so you can drop the ball from your hands. What is the difference between a hit and run and a run and hit in baseball? Difference between a hit and run and the run and hit. If the hit and run is signaled, the batter must swing at the ball, must try to hit the ball. He's got to try to protect the runner who's running immediately. On the run and hit, the runner breaks for the next base, and the batter has the option of either trying to hit it or not hit it. He has the option. That's the run and hit. What is the difference in baseball between a passed ball and a wild pitch? A passed ball is credited to the catcher. It's like an error on the catcher. A wild pitch is scored against the pitcher. So the pitcher is to blame for the wild pitch. The catcher is to blame for the passed ball. And it's only a wild pitch or a passed ball if a runner is able to advance. If there's no runner on base, it doesn't matter. If you're betting on a horse race, can you win your bet even though the horse doesn't win the race? And the answer is yes. If you're not betting to win, you can bet to place or to show. So as long as the horse comes in second or third, you win your bet. A horse comes in first, second, or third. If you bet to show, you win your bet. In baseball, can a player throw his glove at the ball? And the answer is no. It's scored as a triple. The batter is given third base if a player throws his glove at the ball, even if the glove doesn't touch the ball. Just the idea of throwing your glove up in the air awards the batter a triple, third base. And that's all I have for you today. So let's celebrate Father's Day on Sunday. Have a great Father's Day. And be well. And try to be happy. So long. Thank you. I got an audience. Thank you. Thank you, Gretchen. I love this table.
All right, we'll use it each week.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it'll bring baseball to us sooner.
Can't be too soon for me.
All set?
I'm ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Friday. That must mean it's Simple Melodies. Our theme this time is He's a Jolly Good Fellow. I think that probably refers to dads on Sunday, but we'll find out. We're going to start out with a song by Irving Berlin from 1912. It's a song he said he wrote in just 30 minutes. Had originally decided it would just be an instrumental, but on his way to Florida, he worked on it and came up with Alexander's Ragtime Band. Now, was Alexander a real band? Well, maybe, because 2 years earlier, he had written a song called Alexander and His Clarinet. And he did know a band leader by the name of Jack Alexander. So we'll just see. Here, come on here, Alexander's Ragtime Band. Come on here, it's the best band in the land. You can hear a bugle call like you never heard before. So natural that you want to go to war. That's just the bestest band whatever. My honey lamb, come on along. Let me take you by the hand. Up to the man, who's the leader of the band. And if you want to hear that Swanee River played in ragtime, come on here, Alexander's Ragtime Band. Our next song from 1895, one you're quite familiar with, is called The Band Played On, or Casey Would Waltz with a Strawberry Blonde. You can have your choice of titles. Casey would waltz with a strawberry blonde, and the band played on. He'd glide across the floor with the girl he'd adored, and the band played on. But his brain was so loaded it nearly exploded. The poor girl would shake with alarm. He'd nearly leave the girl with the strawberry curl, and the band played on. But his brain was so loaded it nearly exploded. The poor girl would shake with alarm. He'd marry the girl with the strawberry curl, and the band played on. Our next number goes back a while. It's actually, the tune itself is the Londonderry Air. But in 1910, an English lawyer wrote new lyrics, and you'll all recognize it as Danny Boy. Oh, Danny Boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the flowers are dying. 'Tis you must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. And I'll be there in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Daddy boy, I love you so. Here's a 1908 British music hall number It's about an Irish girl come up to London looking for her boyfriend. Has anybody seen Kelly? Has anybody here seen Kelly? K-double-L-Y. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Have you seen him smile? Sure, his hair is red and his eyes are blue, and he is Irish through and through. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly from the Emerald Isle. Our next song is a 1908 Cohan number, homage to an old friend of his, Ed Harrigan. Harrigan. H-A-double-R-I-G-A-N spells Harrigan. Proud of all the Irish blood that's in me. Divil a man can say a word against me. H-A-double-R-I-G-A-N-U-C. It's the name that shame never had been connected with. Harrigan, that's me. Now we go all the way back to 1846 to a minstrel show number. It's a slave lamenting over his master's death, but somebody suggested that maybe he's celebrating the blue-tail fly. When I was young, I used to wait on my master and hand him his plate and pass the bottle when he got dry and brush away the blue-tail fly. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. The master's gone away. And when he'd ride in the afternoon, I'd follow with a hickory broom, the pony being rather shy when bitten by the blue-tail fly. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. My master's gone away. From 1902. A song written by a bar pianist in Chicago. He was observing the carryings on of one of his patrons and wrote a song about him. Bill Bailey, won't you please come home? Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? She moaned the whole day long. I'll do the cooking, honey, I'll pay the rent. I know I've done you wrong. Remember that rainy evening I drove you out with nothing but a fine tooth comb. I know I'm to blame now, ain't that a shame? Bill Bailey, won't you please come home? By the way, his wife didn't think much of that song. From 1880, a British composer by the name of James Frederick Swift, Sailing, Sailing. Sailing, sailing over the bounding main, for many a stormy wind shall blare ere Jack comes home again. Sailing, sailing over the bounding main, for many a stormy wind shall blow ere Jack comes home again. Here's one of those songs whose melody goes all the way back to 1810 by a Scottish composer by the name of James Barr. But in 1895, an Australian poet, Banjo Patterson, wrote the lyrics, Waltzing Matilda. Once a jolly swagman came beside the billabong under the shade of a cool tree, and he sang and he watched and waged as well as Billy Boyle. You come a waltzing Matilda with me, waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang and he watched and waged till his Billy Boyle. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came a jumbuck, drink at the billabong. Up jumped the swagman and grabbed him with glee. And he sang and he shoved that jumbuck in his tucker bag. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang and he watched as he shot jumbuck in his tucker bag. You come a whirring Matilda with me. Again, here's a song that goes way back to the late 19th century. The current words were written by a Scottish journalist by the name of Cliff Hanley, Scotland the Brave. Hark, when the night is falling, hear the pipes are calling, loudly and proudly, down through the glen. There where the hills are sleeping, now feel the blood a-leaping, aye, the spirits of the old Highlandmen. Towering gallant fame, Scotland the mountain hame, why may your proud standard gloriously wave? Land of my high endeavor, land of the shining river, land of my heart forever, Scotland the brave. Oh, an old standard by Will Cobb and Gus Edwards, 1907, School Days. School days, dear old golden rule days, reading and writing and arithmetic, taught to the tune of the hickory stick. You were my queen in calico, I was your bashful barefoot ball. You rode on my slate, I love you, Joe, when we were a couple of kids. The next song is a spiritual, traced back to the Civil War era. Interesting story. It was sung by slaves on one of the sea islands that had been occupied by the U.S. Navy, and one of the officers wrote it down. Michael rolled the boat ashore. Roll the boat ashore, hallelujah. Michael roll the boat ashore, hallelujah. Sister, help to trim the sail, hallelujah. Sister, help to trim the sail, hallelujah. Michael's boat, a music boat, hallelujah. Michael's boat, a music boat, hallelujah. Our next number is from the 1944 film The Harvey Girls, song written by Johnny Mercer and Harry Warden on the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe. Do you hear that whistle down the line? I figure that's engine number 49. It's the only one that sounds that way on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. See the old smoke rising round the bend. I reckon that you know she's gonna meet a friend. Folks around this part get the time of day on the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe. Ooh, you better get the rig. Ooh, ooh, ooh. She got a list of passengers that's pretty big, and they all want to lift to Brahms Hotel. But lots of them been traveling for quite a spell, all the way from Philadelphia on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. Ooh, ooh. Well, there was a mortuary student by the name of Elmer Gilbrecht in the 1920s, and he practiced this song that he had written in the back room of the mortuary. And for years, he tried to get the song published. Now, he would play it in bars around town, but he never got very far. In 1941, the Dick Jurgens Band was in town in Chicago at the Aragon Ballroom, and Elmer went over there and bugged him. He finally let him play the tune and didn't have even a name for it, so they decided to call it Elmer's Tune after Elmer. Oh, the stars always winking and blinking above. What makes a fella start thinking of falling in love? It's not the season, the reason, the plane is the moon. It's just Elmer's tune. What makes a lady of 80 go out on the loose? What makes a gander meander in search of a goose? Who puts the kick in the chicken, the magic in June? It's just Elmer's tune. Listen, listen, there's a lot you're liable to be missing. Sing it, swing it, any old way and in any old time. The hurdy-gurdies, the birdies, the cop on the beat, the candy maker, the baker, the man on the street, the city charmer, the farmer, the man in the moon, all sing Elmer's tune. Here's an interesting song from 1876 by a gentleman by the name of Henry Clay Work. He happened to be at the Pierce Bridge Hotel in a place in England, and he noticed the clock there, very interesting clock, and he wrote a song called Grandfather's Clock. My grandfather clock was too large for the shelf, so it stood 90 years on the floor. It was taller by half than the old man himself, though it weighed not a pennyweight more. It was bought on the morn of the day that he was born, and was always his treasure and pride. But it stopped short, never to go again when the old man died. 90 years without slumbering, tick-tock, tick-tock, his life sentimentally, tick-tock, tick-tock, it stopped short, never to go again when the old man died. Here's a song from 1909, a song written for the Yale choral group, the Whiffenpoofs. It's their closing number, they still use it. Written by two of the lads at the school, but the words were taken from actually a derivation of Kiplinger, and the music itself from an old spiritual. To the table down at Maury's, to the place where Louis dwells, to the dear old temple bar that we love so well. Sing the whiff and poops, assemble with their glasses raised on high, and the magic of their singing casts its spell. Yes, the magic of their singing, all the songs we love so well, shall awaste in hand the morning and the rest. We will serenade our Louis while life and voice shall last. Then we'll pass and be forgotten with the rest. We are poor little lambs who have lost our way. We're little black sheep who have gone astray. Gentlemen songsters off on a spree, doomed from here to eternity. Lord, have mercy on such as we. Lord. Here's a German song written for a musical called The Black Pike in Switzerland. 1939, Oh My Papa, and 1954 became a big hit for Eddie Fisher. Oh my papa, so funny, so adorable, always the clown, so funny in his way. Oh my papa, to me was so wonderful, deep in my heart. I miss him so today. Gone are the days when he would hold me on his knee. Gone are the days. I lost track of it here. Okay. Let me figure out where I am here. There's only 2 sheets. Okay. We're going to start all over. Oh, my papa, to me was so wonderful. Oh, my papa, to me was so good. No one could be so gentle and so lovable. Oh, my papa, he always understood. Gone are the days when he would take me on his knee, and with a smile he changed my tears to laughter. Oh, my papa, so funny, so adorable, always the clown, so funny in his way. Oh, my papa, to me he was so wonderful, deep in my heart. I miss him so today. Now that's a little better. Okay. Our next song, I prevailed my friend here to let me play or deal with. It's a 100-year-old song written in 1920, and it's got Daddy in the title. So I figured it would be most appropriate. It's really an old tearjerker. And I'm going to read to you the verse and then I'll sing the chorus. Okay? I can just remember my mother. Angels one day took her away. You took her place with a smile on your face. That's why I'm happy to say, Daddy, dear old Daddy, you've been more than a daddy to me. You might have gone with the boys every night. You gave them up just to bring me up right. Daddy, dear old Daddy, way up above she can see. You were more than a dad, you're the best friend I've had. Daddy, you've been a mother to me. That was supposed to be sung by a young lad, so you can pretend I was 13 then instead of 93. And our final song, I do believe, is For He's a Jolly Good Fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody else could be. Nobody else could be. Da-da-da. For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody ever can deny. I goofed that one up too. I don't know where I put it here, somewhere. Nobody can deny, nobody can deny, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny. I finally found it. All right, there's folks, that's it. And tomorrow it begins summer. And it's like summer out there today. So go out and enjoy it. In the good old summertime, strolling down a shady lane with your baby mine. He holds your hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign that she's your Tootsie Wootsie in the good old summertime. Thank you, Gretchen. Got that out of the way.
afternoon. It's a great afternoon after listening to the program with the woodworkers and the program with the sports and talking about Father's Day, even from Burt Metz. But that's what we're doing today. We're going to start out with a little fatherly wit. And I'm going to read some of these to you. I'll tell you their name and then you'll understand the comment that comes from the person who made these thoughts about fathers and parenting. From Henny Youngman. My father didn't ask me to leave home. He just took me down to the highway and pointed. I need time for laughter in these. And Sinbad, I have to tell you, some of these comments are coming from people I don't know. So I guess you'll just laugh if you know them. This is from Sinbad. The worst thing that can happen to a man is his wife comes home and he has lost the child. Well, how did everything go? Oh, great. We were playing hide and seek and he's winning. And Paul Reiser, a neighbor of ours, really over from Rhinebeck, all during the pregnancy when I was supposed to be reading baby books and taking baby classes and learning baby CPR, it didn't really go to waste because I did use that time to shop for the perfect video camera. Oh boy. And Dave Barry, remember, what Dad wants for Father's Day is a nap, really. George W. Bush, I've been to war. I've raised twins. If I had a choice, I'd rather go to war. Jerry Seinfeld says, you can tell what is the best year of your father's life because he seems to freeze that clothing style and wear it out. Dave Otwell, when you're young, you think your dad is Superman, and then you grow up and you realize he's just a regular guy who wears a cape. Al Unser, Dad taught me everything I know. Unfortunately, he didn't teach me everything he knows. Jim Gaffigan, there should be a children's song, if you're happy and you know it, you keep it to yourself and you let your dad sleep. And Kathy Ladman, if you ever want to torture my dad, tie him up and right in front of him, refold a map incorrectly. But dads still say, go ask your mother, and because I said so. And stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. And remember this one? If you were told to jump off a cliff, would you? What do you think? I'm made of money? They don't make them like they used to. And when I was your age, and this one, you can't have champagne budget with a beer income. So here comes some income with some more humor, and Billy's going to share.
Okay, I'm going to share from the writings of one of my favorite whimsical poets, Ogden Nash. And this was written not for a dad, but by the dad of a girl aged 1. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. Contrariwise, my blood runs cold when little boys go by. For little boys, as little boys, no special hate I carry, but now and then they grow to men, and when they do, they marry. No matter how they tarry, eventually they marry, and swine among the pearls, they marry little girls. I never see an infant male asleeping in the sun without I turn a trifle pale and think, is he the one? Oh, first he'll crop his curls, and then he'll want a pony, and then he'll think of pretty girls and holy matrimony. A cat without a mouse is he without a spouse. Oh, somewhere he bubbles bubbles of milk and quietly sucks his thumbs. His cheeks are roses painted on silk, and his teeth are lacking on gums. But alas, the teeth will begin to grow, and the bubbles will cease to bubble. Given a score of years or so, the roses will turn to stubble. He'll sell a bond or he'll write a book, and his eyes will get that acquisitive look of raging and ravaging, ravenous for the kill. He'll boldly ask for the hand of Jill. This infant whose middle is diapered still will want to marry my daughter Jill. Oh, sweet be his slumber and moist his middle. My dreams are, I fear, are infanticible. A fig for embryo Lowengrens. I'll open all of his safety pins. I'll pepper his powder and salt his bottle and give him readings from Aristotle. Sand for his spinach I'll gladly bring, and Tabasco sauce for his teething ring, and an elegant gluttonous alligator to play with in his perambulator. And perhaps he'll struggle through fire and water to marry somebody else's daughter. But then, 18 years later, there he wrote another poem. This is a poem by the father of a bride, age 19. And then he says, our times will be in books interred as the era of the eaten word. So tell me, why should I alone be unprepared to eat my own? The longer I live, the sooner I find how priceless is an open mind. I trust that I am wiser plenty at 49 than at 9 and 20. How odd to think that once I rose to sass my daughter's future beaux, a newborn father with arms akimbo, consigning all young men to limbo. Since then, I've lived a fifth of a century, incredibly charming and adventure-y, as you would have were your vicinity one of exclusive femininity. For years, I saw no male but me. Even the Bedlington was a she. I stood apart and watched agog my wife, my daughters, and my dog. They are a higher form of life, my dog, my daughters, and my wife. Inhabitants of a fourth dimension, too mystic for my comprehension. Life was a song in ancient Greece. No debutantes disturbed the peace. No sirens moaning o'er their hair left Mr. Paul for Mr. Pierre. And ladies, conscious of their backs, avoided blue jeans, shorts, and slacks. Yet alone among women, even Achilles got heebie-jeebies and the willies. Therefore, I hail this happy anomaly, a fellow male within the family, a ca- and cause a daughter's wrath to bloom by monopolizing of her groom. Oh, let the girls get on with the trousseau. Here's a Friday at last for Caruso to chew the fat and exchange the dope with, and a simple masculine mind to cope with. A girl and her words are equally random. No use to attend to understand them. You behold in me a crafty vet of Hoover's day, and I'm trying yet. But Johnny's talk is a green oasis of presidential and pennant races. His forthright speech, my mind relaxes, even when discussing taxes. Linnell, though I can't read you clearly, you know I love you long and dearly. You know I wish you barrel on barrel of joy and health and fine apparel, of clinking corpulent piggy banks, and please to accept my heartfelt thanks for bringing me, my child, a man to talk to once in a while. Ogden Nash.
Ogden Nash, thinking of his role and the daughters, thinking as I sitting here about how fathers have touched the lives of many of the men who live here. Bert Metz talking earlier about going to see Babe Ruth at Yankee Stadium with his dad and some happy memories as a 4-year-old. It's pretty amazing. And then when John Ross shared the experience growing up with his dad, who was a real craftsman and a handyman, how he learned to use all the tools and named them and worked with them and created some beautiful pieces that he has here and shared with us and created down in our woodworking shop. And the lamp that sits on our table, the influence that Paul Fargus had by his dad was his dad didn't have those talents, so he had to be the one to take on whatever was needed. And his craft has become a creation of creativity. And I understand is going and helping others who live here at Woodland Pond. So fathers have made a lasting impression, and you men who live here and are fathers and have had daughters to talk about and watch and think about their growing up. Some of you have submitted pieces to us, and I'm going to read some of these things. But before I start reading, I'm going to just remind everybody that today is Juneteenth. And I think about it because I grew up with my father in the suburb of Chicago. And a very important thing my father said is we had to go to Springfield, which was the home of Abraham Lincoln. And on our trip there, I would hear about what Lincoln did. Those are the days before I could read the Emancipation Proclamation. So here, Juneteenth, occurring in the state of Texas in 1865, 3 years after the end of, or 3 years after the Civil War had started, and the Emancipation came about 2 years before that. And 1863 was the emancipation for the freedom of slaves. And the slaves were all those in the Confederate States in the South. And of course, Texas had the fewest members participating in the Civil War. So one of the reasons it really was the end of the Civil War and the freedom of the slaves, and is celebrated now in some places becoming a state holiday, as it just was declared this week by Governor Cuomo to be a free holiday for those of us who live in the state of New York, and it's happening elsewhere too. So it is a special day. So not only are we celebrating for freedom and justice, but we're celebrating for all the fathers who hopefully carry on the good message of that history has taught us. And this is wisdom from Maddie Lee, wisdom from Dad. It's in quotes. The purpose of life is not to be happy, but to matter, to be productive, to be useful, to have it make some difference that you lived at all. And another quote from Dad. Words must surely be counted among the most powerful drugs man ever invented. Each of these was published and has been reprinted many times, but this one, so useful in today's world, was something he said to me. I was carrying on about injustice and being disappointed in the country, worrying about nuclear winter. And he looked at me over his reading glasses and he said, you know, man, we didn't know we were going to win World War II. And from Daphne Will, my dad was the school principal in a small Kentucky village until I was 14 years old. He was a natural born teacher and loved working with young people. He taught me before I started school to use my own mind to decide what was right for me. His advice, in quotes, you have a good brain. Your job is to use it. Find your way in life, end of quote. Daphne says, this I have applied to everything in my life. It may also be why I'm a bit contrary. And from our poet Frida Feldman is a poem written in memory of her husband, Fred Feldman. Fred, you won the lottery. You made a bet that paid. You lived well until the day you died. You made the hit parade. We honor you with laughter and a prayer for all the good. We will always love you. You did the best you could. And it's signed Frida, Nina, and David. And this is mine. My dad spoke these sentences frequently, even switching which sentence came first, depending on the circumstance. But it was all to enforce humility, equality, and confidence. And the lines are, you're no better than anyone else. No one's any better than you. And another line I remember, and I know I shared with my children as they wanted to throw a wrapper out a window because they had seen someone else do that. A line came back at them. We had to stop a car so they could go pick up that paper cup And the line was, yeah, Ma, we know. You're here to make the world a better place. I was a real daddy's girl. My interests, motivation, drive, commitment, choices, and confidence stem from my dad's encouragement and examples. And I feel I chose my husband, Marty, because he possessed many of those same admirable qualities. And I know Marty has been a wonderful dad to his 3 girls and his grandchildren. So my wish is a happy Father's Day to all you wonderful men. You've made a difference. And I'm going to share a piece that was written titled A Dad for All Seasons. It was written in 1998. June is Dad's month, so the calendar says. But in my mind, Dad's month is January, when my father celebrates his birthday. He turned 78 years old this year and is thankfully healthy and active. Remember, that's in 1998. But February is also my dad's month. That's when I think about the way he holds winter at bay in the snowy hamlet in New York State where he and my mother live. Dressed warmly against the weather, he hauls the wood in from the to the house, and he treks across the road to throw salt on the driveway of the house where I was raised, which is now occupied by a cousin. When March arrives, my father comes to mind too, as I shake winter loose from my southern yard and from my life. I attend to raking and pruning and neatening up in the literal and figurative fashion to welcome spring in much the same way he and my mother taught us long ago, directly and by example. I am reminded of the tongue-in-cheek statement about fathers and children that goes something like this: the older I get, the more I am amazed I am at how much smarter my father has become. We can appreciate the gentle humor of that statement and how, as we move through our adult years, we become more appreciative of the things our parents taught us along the way, and how often we find ourselves echoing the phrases of our parents, amazed at ourselves as we do it. Some of us are fortunate to have access to our parents well into our middle years, and increasingly so even into our later years. And should we ever find ourselves taking that gift for granted, we only listen to the bittersweet recollection of others around us, not as fortunate, who must tell their parent stories in a past tense. Yet how rich and rewarding those stories can be. Not long ago, I took an excursion with some friends to visit a small town. We explored the quaint shops and found a nice place to stop for lunch, and then we traveled a little further down a country road. And we stumbled upon an old abandoned wooden house sitting on the edge of a large field. It looked as though one good strong wind would topple that structure right over. That old house held significant meaning for one of the persons in our group, one whose father had spent the first years of his youth living in that house. As we rode toward home that afternoon, our talk turned to nostalgic about childhood homes, about family, about parents, and I'm certain the old house caused us to think about that. As we reminisced, it occurred to me I was the only one in the group who was talking about my father in the present tense. I began to listen more carefully for the memories that those held for them. What I heard in listening is how to celebrate our fathers in all the seasons and for all the seasons of our lives. That was written by Gretchen in 1998. And the postscript is, My dad lived to be 92, and it was my great privilege to return to New York to help him live his remaining years at home, surrounded by those things he loved most. At one point during his final weeks, he told me I was his stake in the ground. Perhaps an apt analogy for a man who spent more than 50 years Boy Scouting, but my brother and sisters and I knew better. He was our stake in the ground. I think Gretchen's our stake in the ground. And I will end today with a prayer of an wise old man shared by Francis Case. A while back, I read a story of a visiting pastor who attended a men's breakfast in the middle of a rural farming area in the country. The group had asked an older farmer who was decked out in bib overalls to say grace before the morning breakfast. Gets up. Lord, I hate buttermilk, the farmer began. The visiting pastor opened one eye to glance at the farmer and wondered, where is he going? And then the farmer loudly proclaimed, Lord, I hate lard. Now the pastor was really growing concerned, and without missing a beat, the farmer continued, and Lord, you know, I don't care much for raw white flour. The pastor once again opened his eyes to glance around the room, and he saw he wasn't the only one to feel uncomfortable. And then the farmer added, but Lord, when you mix them all together and you bake them, I do love warm, fresh biscuits. So Lord, when things come up and we don't like them, or when life gets hard, when we don't understand what you're saying to us, Lord, help us to just relax and wait until you're done mixing. It'll probably be even better than biscuits. Amen. Within that prayer is great wisdom for all of us. Happy Father's Day. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a wonderful afternoon celebrating our dads and granddads, and particularly here at Woodland Pond, we're just so delighted with the things that Paul and John shared with us. This furniture, I'm still looking at it over here. We haven't moved it out of the room yet, but wonderful pieces of work that they did. And we thank Paul Bateman, as always, you know, with these sing-alongs. He does all that research and is able to tell us all a little bit about the songs that we choose each week. And we again thank Billy and Pat on behalf of the Interfaith Committee for reading those wonderful contributions today. Thank you all those of you who did submit materials. So that's our programming. We've had a wonderful week with Beach Day on Wednesday and now a kickoff for Father's Day weekend. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And just a reminder, Jeffrey's last day is with us on Monday. And so we do have a card that Lisa prepared for us. It's on the table by the hostess station where the Woodland Wonder display is. So if you'd like to sign a little message to Jeff, you have time through the weekend to do that. So have a good weekend, everybody.